So welcome back to the third part in this group about inspiring leadership. For the next around 40 minutes, we will hear examples from two very experienced ladies who talk about their daily work with leaders. I'm happy to welcome Pamela and Burkhalter and Regina Thiergardt. Pamela is half Hong Kong Chinese and half Swiss. She recently moved from Zurich to a small lakeside village in central Switzerland. Welcome here. I know why you probably came, because it's so nice in, in central Switzerland. She's originally a lawyer, but she celebrated 20 years of her own business in personal and leadership development, such as executive coaching, team process, and mediation. Pamela is designing and running leadership development programs. In recent years, she focused on senior leadership and organizations with meaningful purposes. Maybe we will get more about these meaningful purposes. In the conversation with her is Regina Thiergardt. She studied chemistry and worked in the pharmaceutical industry in Basel. She worked in various leadership positions and dedicated herself to development. First, it was the development of molecules, and later of people and organizations. In 2011, she turned her back on science and became a coach, and successfully accompanied hundreds of clients in recognizing their potential. 3 years later, she discovered logosynthesis, and her life underwent a profound change. Since then, she inspires people and discovers their uniqueness and life and live their own vision with ease. I'm very much looking forward to your conversation. Welcome with me, Regina and Pamela.
Thank you so much, Monica. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Right. I'm really looking forward to this and talking with you, Regina. So a few words from me first around what you can expect for the next 40 minutes or so. We're going to do a little bit of sharing around experiences that we have and what our work is about, but we'd really like for this to be an interactive session. So we're going to ask you to put your questions in the chat all the way through, beginning now, all the way through to the end, and we'll keep referring back to your questions and weave it into our conversation. But before we start, we wanted to get a sense of who's in the room and why you're here. And beginning with, how many of you are actually new to logosynthesis? We could see in the sessions before there were some questions coming from newcomers, which we're really happy about. So I'm happy to see new faces as well as familiar ones. So the first question is, who's new? If you can either raise your hand or put your name in the chat so that we have a sense of who you are. So we've got a couple of John Dixon, lovely. Paula from Brazil, wonderful. Great, wonderful. And who, I guess the assumption is that everyone else is familiar with logosynthesis, at least to a little extent, or have read the book or have been exposed to it. Fantastic, wonderful. So, do put in the chat why you're here, what you'd like to get out of this session, and I'll, at this point, really hand over to Regina to begin, sharing. First of all, we'll also share a little bit more about our context, and then we'll have a very spontaneous and and we did have a chat beforehand, but this is not an interview for each other. It really is a conversation which we'd like you to take part in. So Regina, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pamela, and hello, everybody. I'm thrilled to see you all here. And I'm really astonished to see how many people already know logosynthesis. I thought we will see here all the newcomers, the greenhorns, so to speak. And now I learn we really need to watch out because we have experts on the panel everywhere. So Monica already introduced me as a scientist. So I'm a scientist by nature. And I think when it all started with logosynthesis, when I heard first about logosynthesis, I thought, oh, that's so interesting. But at the same time, I don't know what it has to do with myself. I think I don't need it. I'm always very aware of who I am and what I want and so on and so forth. And from today's perspective, I couldn't have been more wrong in this judgment. It was really a misjudgment in those days. And to be honest, most of my clients come with the same background. Most of them are also from a scientific arena or from a technical background. It seems that you always attract people from your area or your field. And often they have the same struggles, especially when they are what I'll call silverbacks. So high-ranking managers on the block for many years. Oh, I think I don't need that. I'm well aware of everything. I'm really conscious of who I am and how I act and how I react. And there it goes again. They often come and seek coaching, to be frank, when they are in a crisis situation or when they have an unexpected change in their lives going on. It might be they lost their job or they got restructured. They've passed over for promotion, or they were promoted and don't know how to fill this huge slot of responsibility, or they feel stuck, and sometimes they are on a way to a burnout, and that's the reason why they looking for or seeking coaching. So often it's an unexpected change, and it might be a crisis in their life. It might be also the so-called midlife crisis. Yeah, sure, a lot of men come then for coaching when they're in this. And I think that is really the beauty of logosynthesis. You don't need to start with this right away. You first talk about what do you want to bring to the world? What is your contribution to want to make in your department, in your company, in your business, you name it. And then all of a sudden, if vision becomes clear, but I don't know how to realize. And there we come to the nature of the beast. What holds you back from really living your vision every day with power, with positivity? And I think that is the first moment for most of them that they really come across really hindering beliefs or blockages they hold for years and they were never aware of. And realizing how it not only changes their word, but also the word of the people around them is the most powerful experience they most of the time do. Because when they change how they feel, how they react, how they think, then the environment reacts. It's resonance. Everything is energy. And so I think that is the most beauty of logosynthesis and leadership coaching. So Pamela, now it's back to you.
Thank you, Regina. And I think, yeah, the key word is energy. So as a coach who, started, and I think it's fascinating that you're a scientist and I'm a lawyer, so we're anything but, we don't come from the world of psychotherapy, or we're not human resources, but we had very different backgrounds, which I think for me personally has given an advantage in the sense that I'm not, it's human nature, we box each other in very quickly, whether we believe we do or not. And so it's given me a certain amount of credibility in the corporate world, especially, to have had my background as a lawyer. And the word energy, when I started off as a coach 20 years ago, this year, coaching was still very new. And primarily considered something as there's something wrong with me and therefore I'm given a coach, if anything. And it was still, how shall I say it, very cognitive. And I think the classical way of working is still fairly cognitive and tactical and transactional. And when I found logosynthesis, or when logosynthesis found me 15 years ago, and I knew Willem actually from before that because we went to a mediation course together where he demonstrated tapping, and it didn't do anything for me at all. But then a few years after, I was looking for a new way of working because I love trying things out. I came across logosynthesis 3 times in the same week. And for me, that's always a sign that I need to look at something. So I got 3 different emails, whatever, I heard it. So I went to a course and I haven't stopped since. And to come back to the word energy, that's the piece that is, I think, the cutting edge piece around logosynthesis, because we can work with limiting beliefs. And I studied NLP. There are other beautiful methods that work. And then I would get to a wall. And that wall I could break through with logosynthesis because it's about energy, because the intellect will only get us so far. And it's the reason I've never actually wanted, I never wanted to become a trainer, by the way, and I'm a trainer, but because I attended so many courses in the last 15 years, at some point I'm like, okay, maybe I should get something back on my investment apart from working with with clients, but also because I absolutely love offering training in logosynthesis. It's magical. But to come back to leaders, I never really wanted to work with senior leaders because they tend to be senior, like you were saying, the silverbacks or the white hairs, whatever, senior white males typically, still very much so.
Yeah.
And they're usually, as any adult, but them in particular, and they're usually male, very stuck in their ways with their ways of thinking. And to get them to unstick is actually even more difficult. I have so much more to say, but we want to keep this back and forth. So I'll hand
There
it over
might
back to
be
you.
a secret in being as a woman or acting as a woman in this business. I often had a discussion with my colleagues. Before I had my own company, I worked for almost 8 years in outplacement. So for really people who are forced to look for a new position and to undergo a reorientation. And for some time, all the managing directors of the different branches were female. And we often had a discussion and said, oh, perhaps that's the beauty of being a woman in this male-dominated world, because you can really be blunt and charming at the same time, but really nail it and bring it to the point. Because otherwise, I see it a lot. You beat around the bush. I did a lot of management audits before, and I often heard the comment, oh, it's so difficult to really get feedback, a blunt and honest feedback that is not sugar-coated, because this person is some of my stakeholders. And I think does the trick, that you have it really a good relationship, trust, and then you can also bring the hard factors and nail them down where they are stuck, especially when they have huge aspirations.
And I was just looking at the chat, by the way,
Mhm.
and John Dixon says he's excited to learn about how to help leaders and teams using logosynthesis, and connecting that as well as what you just said. For me, leaders are human, as human as
Yeah.
anyone else, right? So
Yeah.
it's it really is about the trust, and there is that phenomenon of it getting lonelier at the top, as you do climb, and people change over time as they get to the top. So the key is, as with working with anyone else, is building that trust. And so whether you use whatever method you use, and logosynthesis is just one, it's a great one, but it works just as well if there is trust and there is openness. And that's how I see our jobs, to create that space. The aspirations, I think one of the key topics that I see a lot of, well, we're all ambitious people. I don't know anyone who's actually not really ambitious in one way or another. It's all a matter of definition.
Mhm.
But a stumbling block, and Monica and Francisca referred to that earlier, which I think is so true, is the very fact that people are ambitious. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious, but it's that too much of a good thing. The burnout that you talked about before too. It's that when people are so driven, there's a reason that we're all so driven. And what I love about logosynthesis, and for me the difference that it offers, is that you not only begin to look at why you're so driven, especially when it starts to work against you, whether it's your own health or the impact you have on other people, but it's also because it's not just your personality. You can look at what we call the socio-energetic field, the culture. So I'm half Chinese. The Chinese culture is an incredible, and incredibly ethically driven, Confucian thinking, all of that you get to look at with logosynthesis from an energetic perspective, which you don't as much with other methodologies as well. That's something that I've noticed, which people are very open to, because they realize that it's not just the personality, it's the upbringing, it's the fields they've grown up in, right? And all of this.
Mm-hmm.
The gender
yeah,
aspect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think that's also true. A lot of my clients are baby boomers like myself. And I was strongly influenced by Second World War, even though I've never been in the war, but my father was a late returnee from Russia, and my grandfather was a late returnee from Russia, and the family fled from East Prussia. So in our family, the war was still somehow present. And this feeling, we lead now a completely different life, and we need really to enjoy everything and to do everything that is possible, put high expectations on me. So I know how these expectations you have and your aspirations are implanted somehow. It's not only yours, it's also of your family tree, your entire field, and so on and so forth. And when you share this with others, often it comes to a relief to them. Nothing wrong with me. I'm not somebody who needs therapy here. It's really something that literally holds me back to unleash potential. And it's not more, not less. And that somehow neutralizes this fear there might happen something I don't want to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. We were talking about the fact that you're a scientist before, by the way, triggered something for me in terms of clients that one have. And I've worked with scientists from academia. So I might be going off on a slightly different tangent here for a moment, but it's a little bit about cases that we come across, moving from academia into industry. and how it's so typically, what are some of the issues people deal with, and that's one of them, where there's a change in environment and people don't realize that they need to look at something like you're saying until they have an impact. So in cases like this where the hierarchy or the system in academia is so different from industry, and their impact on people is with the 360s or whatever are starting points to look at what's going on. And what's fascinating, I find sometimes, is how people you wouldn't think are open to logosynthesis as well are extremely open to logosynthesis. I don't usually explain very much. I just ask once the trust is there, are you open to trying something out that might not seem very rational to you, but it works, and they're the biggest fans. They'll typically just say, I have no idea what you've done, but it but it
I
works.
trust
It
you.
feels like right, and it feels like magic. It really does sometimes. But yeah.
There was one question by Sergio about how you introduce logosynthesis to composite knees. Often it's through the back door. when I offer coaching programs, something like that, I incorporate logosynthesis as one of the tools to really unleash potential. When you are somebody on the retention plan for a bigger job, perhaps the future CEO, CFO, whatever, then I introduce logosynthesis through the back door. I don't put it up front there or in the most prominent spot, but it's part of being the energy leader. And the energy leader, I mean literally, you radiate the energy you want to see in your business, in your department, in your organization. So first, raise or increase your energy level or shift your energy level, and then you increase the energy of the entire organization. And that's normally the way how it works. Or I offer sometimes a workshop over lunch for free for stress management with a demonstration. And it doesn't work all the time, and immediately it also needs a culture where the time is high, where it really, as you say in German, falls on a fruitful ground, where the seed can grow. But it's often through the back door. And it's not about a spiritual development, it's more about being really able to change culture in this organization, to make this organization profitable, even in the years to come, and so on and so forth.
A question around teams. I've not used it in a team context as such, even though like an exercise which Alha just took us through, I think would be something you could easily introduce. So I really want to thank you, Alha. I think it was a brilliant exercise, by the way, because it follows a structure which the, let's say, more cognitive can work with, and then you just get people to go somewhere where you don't need to explain at the end of the day how things are working, because we actually don't really know. Suzanne's going to talk a little bit about research, right? But as long as it works and people experience it, that's what really matters. So I think there are ways. There's I think a lot of potential yet in terms of working with groups and teams. My focus has primarily been individuals for now. Having said that, I also think that stress is one way in, resilience is another way in. In other words, introducing a self-coaching class is another way in, I think, into organizations. And what you're saying, John, around corporate culture, absolutely. Corporate leadership, and that's also why I have focused more energy there in recent years, because because of the impact it can have when there's a shift with leadership. It makes such a big difference. There is that cascading effect. And creating openness also begins, I don't like the classical pyramid, but it does begin at the top.
And I think the same is true for teams. It always comes to a pain point. When a team is really in a painful situation, I remember once working in a strategy, so it's a completely different strategy, vision and mission workshop with a leadership team. And all of a sudden they were really stuck because they were so afraid numbers were going down, and they promised their stakeholders and shareholders a revenue of whatever, 20% increase and so on and so forth. And then we did a round of logosynthesis for the entire leadership team. And I just asked them to give a symbol on the piece of paper in front of them for what is now really haunting them. And when they realized the relief and went on with a normal discussion, energy was different. And it was amazing to see, okay, let's do it. It's so painful anyway. It can't do any harm. And then, oh, what a surprise.
Just looking at the chat, and we were going to say, I think we have another 10 to 15 minutes. We would be very happy to hear voices apart from the chat. So feel free to also unmute if you wish. Francisca, you write that you've run exercises in an online group with 40 people in the context of skills and fright. I was going to say stage fright. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, Ika.
Talking about energy on LinkedIn. I do it more and more. And when you add in a personal example and take yourself as an example, it gets a lot of acknowledgement. It doesn't change anything, I think, in the beginning, but at least it gets acknowledged.
Yeah, and I think energy is becoming more and more mainstream. It's in that it's not boxed as esoteric anymore. And if not, then we're the pioneers, and that's okay too, because the more of us who talk about it, experience it, the more it's likely to shape the future. I think I'm in it for shaping the future. And yes, there's things we can do for now as well, but it's very much also about sowing seeds for the future.
And it is connected. Your well-being is connected with the well-being of your company. And I think that this idea is more and more accepted. And well-being means I have all my resources available, my creativity, also thinking out of the box, not even always mainstream what I thought for years, and I just repeat and repeat and repeat my statements. I think that is more and more accepted, that we need to step out of what we normally think and discuss. There are so many interventions of startup companies, and you might be out of business in a second if you don't do that.
Absolutely. Ron shares heart math. I'm familiar with heart math from years ago, but I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing. Would you like to say a few words around that, Ron? Because there are many entry points actually for logosynthesis. And so I think it's not about a one solution fits all, but a multi-pronged approach. So Ron, feel free to unmute and share a little. If you care to, remember the call is being recorded as well. Or you can share in the chat as you prefer. There you go.
Now you should be able to talk, Ron. We should hear you.
Ah, he doesn't have his mic set up. Okay.
Ah,
We'll
okay.
keep filling in the gap until you're set up. It looks like you're ready soon.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, now we hear you.
Can you hear me? So HeartMath
Yes.
has done a really good job of putting together, to look at their website, their model of how to get in, the training they have, the research they have. I mean, that's always been a problem of, show me the research. Executives are looking at numbers. How can you get me more profitable? Can you get morale of the company up? And quite honestly, like half the time, it's like an immediate need because they're not hitting their numbers or under all kinds of pressure from their boards. But that is one example that I've looked at in the past. They've done a good job of the tools to get in to talk to the executives. And I agree with Regina. It's like a lot of times you got to come in the back door, not directly.
Thank you.
First, need to give proof. That's clear.
I second
Franziska.
I'm sorry. I'm second the one with the back door. When I wrote that I did exercises with logosynthesis in a setting of presentation skills seminar, I didn't ask for allowance. I had free reign what to do in this 1.5 hour so-called massive open online course. And then at the end, I decided to just introduce logosynthesis, didn't talk a lot about it, just did the sentences. And I said, please only stay if you have an issue with stage fright. They were very open to it. The numbers went down. And then I got a follow-up contract with one of the participants for coaching. So that's how logosynthesis came into this company, and they still don't know, I guess.
One other thing I'd point out, some of the executives that I've worked with on other matters, not necessarily logosynthesis, but it's like, if I talk about energy, they look at me like I'm from outer space. You have to translate, and how does this increase my profits, cut my expenses, tangible things that they relate to, because a lot of them, as soon as I talk about energy, they're talking, oh, you're talking about spiritual things or woo-woo things. And that's not an easy thing to translate to terms they understand.
Money and profit is also a form of energy.
Well, there you go. There you go.
You need really to relate to their language. And that's, I think, it does a trick when you're from the industry. And I think that's the reason why I often work in scientific companies. They have a similar background, you know their language, and you find a way to really relate to them. You were right.
Or like Pamela is a lawyer.
Yeah.
Well, so she says she's a lawyer. Oh, okay.
I don't
About
agree.
establishing the trust. Yeah, I was going to say Heike because I saw your chat, so go ahead.
I don't agree. I'm a scientist myself, but I work with all kind of leaders, and it's so important to find the right metaphor. If you talk about energy in terms of quarks or Higgs particles, they don't understand you. But when you talk about energy in terms of a bass riff on a guitar, which is rumbling in your stomach, they understand energy. So it's not so difficult. And I can't remember any of my leaders who did not buy into this energy concept after some time. I would never start a coaching program in the first session with logosynthesis. I do my exploration and the relationship building. But at a time, you hear whether this person is open by the words he or she uses. And if you then find the right metaphors, then you can work easily with logosynthesis.
Totally agree with you, Heike. And I'm not entirely sure when you talk about the back door in a way, because because I just do what I do. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't declare up front what method I'm using in a way anyway, as long as it works. But I think it's the key, really. I think what we're all agreeing on is finding a way, always with the highest intentions, of course, and connecting, building trust, and using metaphor, speaking their language, which is a language we can relate to, because if we can't relate to it, then and you coming back to the purposeful piece, where I feel I've reduced work a lot, and I'm very selective now. feel very privileged in being able to be selective, because I want to work with organizations which are open and where there is a sense of purpose or sustainability, not just as a buzzword, but really live it. Because I think I used to be, my tendency has been to be a fighter. And I do see myself, I started stuff 20 years ago, which people are talking about now, and this is not about lack of modesty. It's just sometimes we're ahead of the times, and logosynthesis is ahead of the times in a way. It's not we're not there yet. So it might feel like we're battling, which is why it's easier to work with people who are more open to it, and organizations which are more open to it, and make life easier for ourselves, which is why I think the community is so important, because then we learn from each other and can build on each other's ideas, and find more ways to reach more people for the right reasons, and the right, and not in a presumptuous way, but in a well-meaning way, because we know what it can do when we free up our resources and when there's flow. It's just so beautiful. I think that's so key.
And even though I'm normally not in this generation gap or whatever, but here I experienced that younger leaders are much more open. For them, it's quite normal also to practice mindfulness and whatever. And they come with a clear intention, I want to apply logosynthesis. In their case, it's often completely different. They actively seek help or seek for coaching, and they want to work on beliefs or whatever, or to feel more lighthearted and whatever their idea is, in the way to be more creative and more effective and more productive. So with them, often it's really, really easy to come into the game.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes I've made is trying too hard to convince, or to push the river, and you can't force people, you can't force anything in that sense. It backfires in a way. So it's really finding the way, how we want to go.
The same is true for us. We also energy leaders or energy managers, and we need to radiate the energy we want to see elsewhere in the world. And if we are really stiff and stubborn and really against the wall, it's really difficult. I have the same experience.
Yeah. Just want to do a quick time check, Monica. How are we doing? Because
39, so we have 6 more minutes.
Great. What other questions are there, or avenues would you like to explore whilst we're here? There's a question in the chat from Sergio, talking about models. How's logosynthesis different from NLP? Oh, then we need to go into NLP. I think they're very supportive of each other. In fact, what Alcha you just demonstrated was partially NLP, right? The Bateman model. So I'll take a quick stab at it and then hand it over to whoever else would like to speak to it, because I know there are others who have NLP backgrounds. For me, the modalities come from NLP. So the VACOG, the perceptions, how you identify the trigger in terms of the visuals, the kinesthetics, the auditory. That's very much that comes from NLP. My experience with NLP though was I found it hard work, because I could work with little models. So the models of excellence idea is beautiful, but I found it very mechanical at times, using images and nearly trying to insert and interject, ironically, in order to get something to work. Whereas I find logosynthesis, the way we explore and do detective work to identify triggers, and the fact that it works with energy, which for me is different. I don't see, that's not my immediate association with NLP is working with energy, even though it is in some way. But it's much harder work. I find logosynthesis much easier. You can literally be, lazy, stupid, and slow, because you don't need to be as guiding and directive in terms of content. I also did hypnotherapy through NLP, where you insert, and I find that very, in German we say heikel. It's delicate when you start to insert instructions for a client, by taking them into hypnotherapy and giving them language. It makes you very, very aware of the language you use. That's something I've learned through NLP. You learn to really work with language. But I find logosynthesis, you are neutral. You're completely neutral. And when you're working with logosynthesis, that's the other thing. That's one of the biggest things for me, is you connect with essence. I am always so energized after working with clients, because of the space you go into, and you end up in. So I didn't feel the same way about NLP. So that's my nutshell. I don't know if that helps a little bit, but it's a great, fantastic basis. I also want to say that, really, really worthwhile to look into as well. Yeah, any other opinions or thoughts around that? Thank
There's
you,
another
Olga.
question in the chat, if you want to refer to that.
I saw the question, how you define inspiring leaders? What are your characteristics? I tried to collect all the characteristics over years, and more I come up with an explanation. It's a quote actually from John Quincy Adams, and it's in the way of, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader. That could be one idea, really inspire others to be the best version of themselves, whatever best version means. It's not always higher, richer, whatever. And on the other hand, I really think somebody who really lives his or her unique vision and wants to make a contribution, finally. That's inspiring others to be into the game, to go with them, to thrive for their own growing and to thrive for their own vision. I think that is for me an inspirational or inspiring leader. What are your definitions?
I find myself veering away from the word leader a lot these days versus leadership, simply because of the connotations of one person deciding. So it's this, yeah. We won't go into that because we've just run out of time. But for me, the word humility comes to mind, which has been a big one for me. It's really, I find people who are inspirational, and whom I would choose to follow, have a great sense of humility. is one of the key characteristics.
Don't take themselves too seriously. I agree.
Thank you very much, you both. It was great listening to you. The time is up. I don't know, maybe many more questions will pop up, and I'm sure that Regina and Pamela are happy to share their opinion in Facebook groups of Logosynthesis, or in other, you will find another possibility to contact them or any other people from the community. So my takeaways from this session are, we are all humans, and we are just influenced by our background and our fields we are living in. And there is nothing wrong with us. And everybody has the potential to increase the energy. And I think that's, for me, the most important thing, to go to someone who is, you know, feeling good, having no issues. Why not increase your energy and feel even better?